Adrian Voss didn't believe in accidents. Not in
It's all
business,
so
not in life,
vast.
not in the small daily decisions that most people made without thinking. Every choice was a calculation. Every relationship was an investment. Every risk was mapped before it was taken. At 40, he had built Voss Group into one of the most powerful private investment firms on the continent. 12 floors, 230 employees, contracts that reached into government corridors and private boardrooms that the public didn't know existed. He had started with nothing. No inheritance, no
This
family
city never
connections,
sleeps. It
no
pulses
safety
with
net,
opportunity.
just a mind that processed
We must
faster
seize the
than
moment,
most,
lead with
and a
vision.
will that refused to accept
The
the
future
word
is ours to
impossible.
shape.
His name was known in rooms he never entered. His signature had more weight than most people's spoken word. He wore this power quietly, no flashy cars, no unnecessary spectacle. He dressed in dark, tailored suits and moved through the world like a man who had already calculated every room before he walked into it. His staff called him Mr. Voss, never Adrian. He had never corrected them. Informality suggested softness, and softness was a gap.
The projections
and
are
gaps were what
updated.
people climbed through.
Let's
He had
review.
not survived
The
this
metrics look
long by
strong.
leaving gaps.
Couple the reports.
He controlled everything inside his walls. He had no reason to expect that to change. The 12th floor of Voss Group operated like a sealed system. Visitors required 2 approvals before their names even reached Adrian's assistant, Lena. She was meticulous, the kind of person who noticed when a chair was 2 inches from its correct position and quietly fixed it before anyone else arrived. She had worked for Adrian for 6 years and still thought carefully before speaking to him directly. The floor was glass and gray steel, clean, structured, deliberately cold. There were no personal photographs on display, no soft touches on the walls. Adrian had once removed a small plant someone placed near the elevator, not because he disliked plants, but because no one had asked. Everything in this space existed because he had approved it. The security system logged every entry. The elevator required a key card after 7 p.m. Deliveries were screened on the ground floor. Even journalists who had published favorable profiles of Voss Group had never made it past the lobby. Adrian ran his firm the way he ran his mind, with strict, invisible boundaries that people learned to respect before they learned anything else about him. There were a word people used for this kind of discipline. Most called it control. Adrian called it clarity. He believed in knowing exactly what was in his world and exactly what wasn't. That had always been enough. It was a Wednesday. Lena appeared at his office door at 11:23 with an expression Adrian recognized immediately, the careful, uncertain look of someone delivering information they hadn't fully processed themselves. Mr. Voss. She held her tablet against her chest. There are 2 boys downstairs, in the lobby. He looked up from his screen. Boys. Children, sir. Identical twins. They came through the main entrance on their own. Security stopped them at reception. They don't have an appointment, no adult with them, no contact name. He waited. They asked for you by name, she said. He set his pen down. By name. Yes, sir. They said, and I'm quoting directly, we're here to see Adrian Voss. He'll want to meet us. Adrian looked at her for a moment, then he looked back at his screen, then back at her. How old? The receptionist guessed 8 or 9. He said nothing for several seconds. There was no scenario in his current schedule, no contract, no partnership, no social obligation that produced 2 unaccompanied children in his lobby. Send someone to wait with them, he said finally. Find out where they came from, who brought them. Security already asked, Lena said. They said they came alone. And they're still there, sir, waiting. He watched the lobby feed from his desk monitor, a quiet habit he maintained but never advertised. 2 boys sat side by side on the long gray bench near the reception desk. Identical in every visible way, same height, same build, same dark haircut close on both sides. They wore matching dark blue jackets over white shirts, clean, deliberate. They were not fidgeting. That was what caught his attention first. Most adults who waited in that lobby, executives, lawyers, investors, found ways to fill the silence, phones, papers, restless crossing and uncrossing of legs. These boys sat completely still, backs straight, hands resting on their knees. They weren't looking at their surroundings with the wide-eyed distraction of children in an unfamiliar space. They were looking at it with the quiet, measuring attention of people who had been told exactly what to expect and were checking whether the reality matched. One of them said something to the other. Just a few words. The other nodded. No visible alarm, no discomfort. They looked like small men, patiently waiting for a meeting they had every right to attend. Adrian watched the screen for 3 full minutes. He reached for his phone, then set it back down. He pressed the intercom. Lena. Yes, sir? Bring them up. He stood when they entered. He hadn't planned to. It happened before the decision did, which was unusual enough to notice. They walked in side by side, the way they had sat, synchronized without effort, like two versions of the same person moving in perfect coordination. Lena stepped aside and closed the glass door behind them. The office was large. Most visitors walking in for the first time reacted to its scale, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spreading out behind him, the long desk that anchored the room like something immovable. These two didn't react. They looked at the room, then at him, and that was the end of their survey. One of them, the one on the left, met his eyes first. The look was direct, not aggressive, not nervous, just open and entirely steady. The other followed a second later with the same quality of gaze. For a moment, no one spoke. Adrian studied them the way he studied everything, quickly, thoroughly, looking for the detail that explained the situation. He found many details. He did not find the explanation. They were approximately 8 or 9 years old. They stood with good posture. They were not afraid. One of them spoke first. You have a nice view, he said. His voice was calm, even slightly conversational. The city looks different from up here. Adrian kept his expression neutral. He was very good at that, at making his face a wall while his mind moved quickly behind it. He gestured to the 2 chairs across from his desk. Sit down. They sat, together at the same moment, with the same unhurried ease. He lowered himself back into his chair and looked at them across the desk. Who brought you here? He asked. The one on the left, slightly more expressive, Adrian noted, by a small margin, said, No one brought us. We came on our own. From where? Home. Where is home? The boy looked at his brother briefly. Something passed between them. Quick, wordless. The kind of communication that develops over years of shared proximity. The other boy said, Not far. Adrian looked at them both. You told my receptionist you came to see me specifically, that I would want to meet you. Yes, the first boy said. How would you know that? Neither of them answered. Right away. They weren't stalling. They had the composure of people considering how much to offer and how. It was a specific kind of silence. Adult in quality. He had sat across from negotiators with less control of a room. The second boy finally said, Because some meetings need to happen, even if no one plans them. Adrian's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. What are your names? He asked. Theo, said the one on the left. And I'm Kane, said the one on the right. Last name? Another shared glance. Then Theo said, We go by our mother's name. Adrian waited. Which is? She'd prefer to tell you herself, Kane said. Calm, straightforward, not evasive in the way of someone hiding something, more in the way of someone who had been taught exactly how much to say. Adrian leaned back. You're 8 years old. 9, Theo corrected, gently but immediately. 9 years old, Adrian said. You came to my building alone, through security. You asked for me by name. You're now sitting in my office telling me your mother's name is something she'd prefer to share personally. Yes, Kane said. That's correct. Why? Theo tilted his head. Because you're important to her. And she's... Kane put a hand briefly on his brother's arm. Barely a touch. Theo stopped. She's what? Adrian asked. Kane said, She's someone you once knew. Adrian's eyes moved between them, back and forth, slowly. Something he couldn't categorize stirred in his chest, quiet but persistent, like the first vibration of something large and distant. He kept his voice flat. A lot of people claim to know me. She doesn't claim it, Theo said. She just knows it. He had Lena bring them water. It was an automatic hospitality response, the same he'd offer any guest. But the moment she placed the glasses on the desk and left, he registered what he'd done. He had settled them in, made them comfortable, extended the kind of quiet welcome he reserved for people he intended to keep talking to. He hadn't decided to do that. He had just done it. They accepted the water with small, polite thanks. No performance, just manners, the kind that are taught so young they become invisible. He watched them drink. He was building a mental file the way he always did, collecting data points, looking for the pattern that would make the picture clear. What he had so far: 9 years old, identical twins, well-dressed, clean, calm. Arrived without adult supervision, which meant either someone had dropped them close by and retreated, or someone had trusted them completely with this task. They spoke with a precision that didn't match their age. Every answer was measured, nothing unnecessary. They had been coached, or they were simply extraordinary. And beneath all of it, underneath every professional assessment his mind kept reaching for, something else was running, something that didn't belong in any file. A feeling he had not had in a very long time, the feeling that something in this room already knew him. He looked at Theo's hands. He didn't know why. His eyes simply moved there as the boy reached for the glass a second time. Long fingers, the knuckles slightly prominent, a small scar on the right index finger, barely visible. His gaze moved to Kane's hands. Same structure, same proportion, identical, as you would expect. And then it hit him. Not the hands themselves, but what the hands reminded him of. He looked at his own hand resting on the desk. He turned it slightly. He had the same finger length, the same knuckle prominence. He had never particularly thought about his hands. They were simply his hands. But looking between the boys and himself, he felt something shift. Not loudly, not dramatically, more like a room when someone changes the light. Barely different, but different. He looked up at their faces again. He had been looking at them as a matched pair, as a unit, two boys, the visual pattern dominant. But now he looked at them individually, one feature at a time, the jaw, the brow, the slight angle of the nose. He had seen these features before, not in a photograph, not in a stranger, in the mirror, every morning for 40 years. He set both hands flat on the desk, very carefully, and said nothing. He called Lena through the intercom. "Hold everything for the next hour." "Sir, the Singapore." "Hold it." He clicked off. The boys watched him without alarm. They had registered the shift in his attention. He could see it in the way Theo straightened slightly, and Kane became very still. But neither spoke. They were waiting. He had the specific, disorienting sense that they had anticipated this moment, that they had watched him arrive at it and were now simply giving him room to process it at his own pace. He stood, walked to the window. The city below moved the way it always did, indifferent, constant, enormous. He pressed one hand against the glass and looked out without seeing anything. He was running the math that was not math. The age, 9 years old. 9 years ago, he had been in a different chapter of his life. Before the 12th floor, before the full weight of Voss Group had settled into its current shape, he had been building, and he had been alone, and there had been one person. One. The memory arrived before he was ready for it. Not violently, the way some memories come. Quietly. Like something that had been standing in a back room for years, waiting for the door to finally open. He turned back to face them. "Tell me your mother's first name," he said. "Mara," Theo said. The name did not land softly. It landed the way a stone lands in still water. Contact, then rings, spreading out before you can stop them. He kept his face still. He had years of practice keeping his face still. But his grip on the window ledge tightened once briefly before he released it and walked back to his desk. He sat down. He looked at Theo, then Kane. Kane was watching him with something close to compassion, a quality that had no business being present in a 9-year-old boy's face, and yet it was there. "Mara," he repeated. His voice came out even. "What's her last name?" "Solis," Kane said. "Mara Solis." He let the full name settle. He had not spoken it in 9 years. He had not allowed himself to. There had been a decision, clean, final, the way his decisions always were. He had been 28. She had been 26. He had chosen the company over everything else, and she had let him go without a scene, without a demand, without a word that could be called unfair. She had simply said, "I understand." He had believed, for 9 years, that her understanding had been the end of the story. He looked at the two boys sitting across from him. Neither of them looked away. "Does your mother know you're here?" he asked. "Yes," Kane said. "She knows." "She sent you?" Theo answered this one. "She didn't send us. We asked to come." "You asked." "Yes, and she said yes." "She said," Theo paused, choosing carefully. "She said it was our choice to make." Adrian looked between them. "What does that mean?" Kane said. "It means she thought we were old enough to decide." Decide what exactly? Neither of them answered immediately. Adrian leaned forward, both elbows on the desk. I want a direct answer, he said. The tone, firm, low, the one that made grown professionals sit straighter, landed in the room. Kane met it without flinching. We wanted to see you, he said. Before she had to explain things, we wanted to see you ourselves first. Why? Because, Theo said, with the careful delivery of someone presenting a fully considered thought, we wanted to know what kind of man you were before we knew who you were to us. Adrian sat with that for a moment. He had built an empire on reading people, on walking into rooms and understanding power and intention before anyone spoke. He had never in 40 years been assessed first. He found he had no prepared response to that. He asked questions, careful, structured, the kind he used in early-stage negotiations when he needed information without revealing how much he wanted it. How long had they lived in the city? A few years. They'd moved when they were 6. What school did they attend? A private school, not far from the East District. Did they have other family nearby? Their grandmother on their mother's side. She helped sometimes. He built a picture from the answers. A picture of a life that was orderly, loving, and deliberately self-contained. Mara had built something, not a grand empire, but a steady, protected world for 2 children. The details were plain enough. The things not said were louder. She had raised them alone. That part was never stated, but it was embedded in everything. The precision of their manners, the confidence in their self-sufficiency, the way they had navigated his lobby and his office, with the calm of children who had learned to handle things because there was usually only one adult in the room. He felt something move through him that he didn't name. He wasn't ready to name it. He asked, "What do you know about me?" Theo said, "That you built something from nothing, that you're very controlled, and that our mother keeps one photograph she thinks we don't know about." He went very still. A photograph. In the back of her desk drawer, Kane said, not triumphantly, just factually. We saw it once, 2 years ago. We didn't ask about it then. Why not? She had a look on her face when she didn't know we were watching her, Theo said. Like it was something that still hurt. We didn't want to push. Adrian said nothing. He was looking at these 2 boys and recalibrating everything. The photograph existed, which meant she had kept something, which meant the ending he had decided was final. The clean, closed, chosen ending had continued on her side of the wall in ways he had never known. He thought about her face. 26 years old, standing in the doorway of her apartment. I understand, she had said. He had taken that understanding and made it into closure. He had walked away and built another 10 years of precision and control, and the whole time, there had been this. 2 boys who looked like him, one photograph in the back of a drawer. A world he hadn't known was turning. Does she know you found it? He asked. No, said Kane, and she doesn't need to, Theo added. Not from us. They looked at each other briefly, then back at him. She'd tell you herself, Kane said, if you asked her. He made a decision. It wasn't impulsive. He didn't make impulsive decisions, but it was fast, faster than his usual pace. He stood, walked to the window once more, stayed there for 60 seconds, long enough to think, short enough that they'd see he was thinking, not retreating. Then he turned around and said, I want to speak with her. Neither boy looked surprised. We thought you might, Theo said. Can you reach her? Kane pulled a small, folded piece of paper from the inside pocket of his jacket. He placed it on the edge of the desk and pushed it toward Adrian with 2 fingers. Neat, deliberate, like a card played in a game they had been holding for the right moment. Adrian looked at the paper, then at Kane. You came prepared, he said. Our mother raised us to be prepared, Kane said. Adrian picked up the paper, a phone number written in neat, careful handwriting. Child's handwriting, precise and practiced, but still rounded at the edges. He folded it once and held it. The office was quiet. Outside, the city continued its indifferent motion. He looked at both boys, really looked, past the strangeness of the moment, past the structural shock of what was assembling itself in front of him. He looked the way you look when you're finally willing to see something. You said you wanted to know what kind of man I was, he said, before you knew who I was to you. Yes, said Theo. And? He asked, what do you think? Theo tilted his head. Kane kept his gaze steady. They exchanged one of their wordless communications, that small internal conference that twins conduct in fractions of seconds. Then Theo said, "You haven't smiled once since we walked in." Adrian waited. "But you called off your meetings," Kane added. "You gave us water, you asked good questions, and you haven't tried to make us leave." Theo finished. "That tells us more than smiling would have." Something moved through Adrian's chest, unnamed, unwelcome in its softness, and entirely impossible to stop. He had been assessed, carefully, intelligently, by two 9-year-old boys who had clearly spent time thinking about this before they ever walked through his door. He set the folded number on his desk in front of him. "I'm going to call her today," he said. "She'll probably be nervous," Theo said. "She doesn't show it, but she will be." "I know," Adrian said. The words came out before he'd considered them, and they were true. He did know. He remembered exactly how she carried anxiety. Pulled inward, quieter than usual, hands busy with small tasks that didn't need doing. He remembered it as clearly as if 9 years had not happened at all. Both boys looked at him when he said that. A new quality entered the room. Not tension, recognition. Like something had been confirmed. He called her at 4:15. He waited until Theo and Kane were with Lena. She had offered to show them the building's rooftop garden with the careful, slightly baffled professionalism of someone doing exactly what their employer asked without understanding why. He dialed. She picked up on the third ring. "Mara," a pause. Brief, half a breath. Then, "Adrian." Her voice was the same. A little lower, maybe, steadier. But the texture of it, that specific warmth that lived just underneath her composure, hadn't changed at all. "They're here," he said. "I know. They came on their own. You knew they were coming. I knew they'd decided to. I didn't stop them." "Why?" She was quiet for a moment. "Because I've been trying to figure out how to begin this conversation for 9 years, she said. "And they solved the problem the only way those two would, by simply showing up." He almost smiled. Almost. "You should have told me," he said. It wasn't an accusation. He had removed the edges from it deliberately, made it a statement, something to sit on the table between them. "I know," she said. "I thought about it every year, every birthday, every school play, every report card. I picked up my phone more times than I can count." "What stopped you?" Silence. Then, "Fear," she said simply. "And I'm sorry for that." He sat in silence after she said it. Sorry. The word from her mouth, not defensive, not explained away, just offered, clean and whole. He pressed 2 fingers to his forehead. The office was empty now, just him, the city behind the glass, and a phone call 9 years late. "The photograph," he said. "They told me." Another pause. "I should have hidden it better," she said. There was something almost like a quiet laugh underneath the words. Not joy, more the release that comes when something long carried is finally set down. "Why did you keep it?" She took a moment. "Because I wanted them to have something of you. Even if it was just a face in a drawer, something that said he existed, he was real, even if he didn't know about you." He closed his eyes. He had built 40 years on not being moved, on processing things cleanly and filing them in the correct place and moving forward. He had no place to file this. "I want to meet them properly," he said. "Not like this, not as a man who heard about them today, as someone who intends to be." He stopped. The word he was reaching for was large. He hadn't earned it yet. He said, "Someone who intends to stay." The silence on her end lasted 4 full seconds. Then she said, "Okay." They brought Theo and Kane back to his office at 5 o'clock. The rooftop garden had produced a drawing. Kane had sketched the skyline on a page from Lena's notepad. He held it with both hands when he walked back in. Adrian looked at the drawing, then at Kane. "You draw?" "Sometimes," Kane said. He handed the drawing to Adrian, without ceremony, like it was natural, like handing something to someone who already belonged in the category of people you could give things to. Adrian held the paper. Something about the action broke something in him, quietly, the way ice breaks in water, unseen beneath the surface. He sat down slowly. The boys sat across from him. The desk between them suddenly felt wrong, too formal, too deliberate for this particular moment. He pushed back and moved to the small seating area near the window. They followed. The 3 of them sat, him in the larger chair, the boys on the small sofa, and the arrangement felt startlingly different from the meeting it had started as. "Your mother and I are going to talk," he said. We know, Theo said. And then, Kane asked. Adrian looked at him. The directness was equal parts uncomfortable and extraordinary. And then, he said, I would like to spend some time getting to know you both, if that's something you want. The boys looked at each other, then at him. Theo said, we wouldn't have come if we didn't. This small, 20, he stood at the window again after they left, but it was different this time. He wasn't looking at the city the way he usually did. Not as something he'd conquered, not as a view that confirmed what he'd built. He was just looking. The way you look when the thing you thought was most important quietly moves to second place without asking permission. On the chair where Kane had sat, the skyline drawing still rested. He had not filed it away. He had left it there on purpose. He was not the same man who had started this morning. He could feel the difference, not dramatically, not with the noise of collapse, but in the way a building settles when something fundamental shifts in the foundation. It didn't fall. It just became something slightly different from what it was. He picked up his phone. He had one more thing to do before he left the office. He texted Lena, clear my calendar next Friday, full day. She replied in under a minute, the investor call. He typed back, move it. He set the phone down. He had a daughter. He had sons. He had a woman who had carried something alone for 9 years and said sorry without being asked. He had a drawing of a skyline on a chair. He had, perhaps for the first time, something inside his empire that he hadn't built, and it was the only thing in the room he was certain was real.